Picture a perfectly silent room, just the sound of crickets outside, a cool night breeze, and a solitary student studying under the harsh yellow light of a single desk lamp. It is truly a fragile world of deep academic dedication. Then a friend walks in and shatters the quiet. He brings news of an immediate windfall. He earned more in one afternoon of rituals than in months of traditional study. The friend urges the student to close his books. He reveals that the government exams they've both been preparing for have already been leaked. The papers are being sold, rendering his honest preparation useless. This creates an impossible vacuum. In an instant, the student is forced to choose between the internal life of a scholar and the basic necessity of financial survival. To understand why a leaked test paper is so devastating, you have to look at the function of the government exam. It is the sole legitimate bridge connecting a 2,000-year-old classical education to a stable modern career. When those exams are leaked, the math changes. Years of rigorous academic preparation are instantly worth nothing compared to a stolen answer key. This creates a rigged meritocracy. It takes a heavy toll on students who realize that their intellect and effort cannot overcome institutional corruption. When a nation's meritocracy systems break, the people who are punished most are the brilliant, dedicated minds who committed to the rules of the game. We can call the student's original path Economy A, the grandfather's path. It is the pursuit of high academic scholarship and philosophical mastery within the Sanskrit language. Looking at this traditional Sanskrit manuscript, you can see the complexity of the work. The text relies on the precision of red and black ink syntax to convey incredibly dense philosophical concepts. Deciphering this logic is the work of a lifetime. But Economy A has a fatal flaw. It is entirely dependent on external structures. It requires state funding and fair exams to survive. When those institutions collapse, the logic on the page remains pristine, but the person reading it is left with nothing. Holding on to the idealism of this classical path in a corrupt system no longer leads to intellectual greatness. It is a guaranteed route to financial ruin and homelessness. That brings us to Economy B, Karmakanda, or the market for performative ritual priesthood. Look at this young man performing a public ritual. Unlike the isolated world of academia, there is an immediate, unregulated consumer demand for these public rituals. It offers a direct path to cash. This chart shows the talent drain in motion. When the path to academic mastery is blocked by corruption, it creates a pressure valve. Students are diverted away from scholarship and into the ritual gig economy just to survive. Systemic corruption commodifies the tradition. It turns a pursuit of wisdom into a series of billable hours, forcing scholars to operate as transactional workers in a market that prioritizes performance over deep understanding. Back in the shadows of his room, the student surrenders to the logic of the market. He gives up the quiet life of study for the pragmatism of survival. This is the grandfather's ghost, the quiet severing of an intergenerational dream. An elder's vision of his grandson achieving academic greatness is abandoned because the youth can no longer afford to keep that vision alive. The impact reaches further than this one room. When a student chooses survival over study, he isn't just one person leaving the field. He is part of a wider collapse in the intellectual lineage. These two boys represent a generation whose intellectual potential is being diverted before it can even begin. This labor shift changes the nature of the language itself. When scholars stop writing new commentaries and instead spend their lives repeating fixed mantras for a fee, the intellectual tradition stops growing. It becomes a static tool for performance rather than a living vehicle for philosophy. When a society's economic systems fail, its highest ideals and deepest cultural legacies are the very first casualties, sacrificed quietly in the dark for the sake of basic survival.